Good afternoon. My name is Red Oudkerk-Pol. I'm CEO of the Europe chain. And let me introduce my panel here. We have Claudio Shiva, Silas Sepp, Wijnand Kuipers, and Rick Smit. You're visible now. Welcome all. Let's do a round of introduction first. Claudio, can I ask you to go first? Then I'll be the last one.
Okay, thank you so much. How are you? First of all, honor and privilege to be here and sharing this panel with you. We had an opportunity to talk yesterday with Reed, and I believe all the panelists are some amazing people that join us today, and there's going to be a very interesting discussion. I'm into cybersecurity and also a little bit into more traceability, and we work a lot with whistleblowers, helping in our spare company time bring together new regulations from our small lobby in Brussels to help with the current situation. And we try to be a blockchain company first, integrating traceability and this kind of solutions in all our day-to-day tools, and because it's we think it's a fundamental part. And also, as we're going to see later in this talk, it's also for our type of environments like government and similar. The traceability part, and authenticity, it's primal.
Silla, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Silla Sepp. I'm based here in Tallinn, Estonia, and I serve as the community lead at My Data Global organization, which is an international nonprofit, but based in Finland, headquartered there. And we have the main mission to empower individuals with the right to their self-determination regarding their personal data. And we work with a lot of different kind of infrastructure, different kind of service providers. My Data is not a one product or service that we would provide, but rather that we bring those all different parties together to see also how can we move towards this better digital future that I'm sure we all want. Perhaps, yeah, I will share for sure more about My Data also a little bit later.
Okay, Wijnand, we have been chatting and missing each other, but maybe you can introduce yourself because I'm curious.
All my fault, I'm sorry about that. But yeah, my name is Wijnand Kuipers, made in Holland quite a while ago. I'm currently involved in a movement that is called Threefolds, where we believe that the current setup in the current digital world is not sustainable and equal and inclusive enough, where we are enjoying good services and can get affordable services, but that's not true for everyone. So we as a group are actually really deep down in creating technology to make those services available in more locations and more places than what is currently available. And I think for today's discussion, that will also elude and get us into talking about security and how do we do that and how can we help people to have a more secure environment. Thank you.
And Rick, also, I think made in Holland, or?
Yeah, we're made in Holland as well. Hey, Red, nice meeting you guys all, being on the panel. Thank you very much for that. I'm Rick Smit, CEO and founder of LTO Network. We started back in 2017 to create a blockchain which complies with the GDPR regulation we have in Europe. And we have a strong focus on multi-stakeholder collaboration. So basically collaborating between multiple stakeholders. Besides that, the strong focus on making sure that data is privately and secure at the same time, and that users are in control of their own data.
Okay, Rick, I have a little bit of echo on your mic. Maybe you can have a look at that. Let me introduce myself, and for this topic, we have to go back 23 years ago, because at that time I started a company called Kahuna, which is a cybersecurity company. Cybersecurity was unknown at that time, but in about 12 years, 14 years ago, I was asked to participate in the Dutch IT branch organization called Nederland ICT. And I was chairman of that group of professionals that had a cybersecurity background. The Dutch government came to us and said, could you guys please help us on the Dutch national cybersecurity strategy? Because we think cybersecurity is going to be much more important, and we want the opinion of the IT industry to help us out. And so I did that. I basically wrote the national cybersecurity strategy together with the team. So I was very much involved at the launch, basically, of the Dutch national cybersecurity strategy. And of course, that has to do a lot with the topic of today. So I have a little bit of background in what the Dutch national cybersecurity is doing. And 2 years ago, to make a hop to today, I got very passionate about blockchain, and particularly the EOSIO protocol. So I founded EOS Amsterdam and EuropeChain, an EOSIO sister chain. So let's start off with the topic of today. Claudio, are you more privacy or more cybersecurity? What's your preference?
Well, I'm more of a cybersecurity guy, but lately I'm joining with so much lawyers that privacy is starting to be a part of of the day-to-day. So I think that privacy is it's something inherited with cybersecurity. Privacy and security is not the same thing. There are very different concepts. They share some things in common, but as you start looking into the different cybersecurity and security in general topics, you see that that privacy is not the main concern. The main concerns are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And since that is built around those, at least those three first principles, you could resemble somehow privacy to confidentiality, and take a look at what do they share in common. And even so, it's not the same thing, confidentiality and privacy. There are still different area of study. And I think that the best thing about blockchain and all the technology we are developing in the last 3 or 4 years, and all the connections we are putting together between all those things, are breaking that gap between either we are pro-security or either we look about our privacy. Before, we always talked until very recently that we are sacrificing privacy in favor of security. And we are seeing that thanks to blockchain and other technology and availability to connect all the things, and also with all the great job that people like you did in the government side and the European Union, that tried to regulate all these things and try to put open data into and reuse all the government data into place, that made different government agency share their data in a safe way or anonymized way, change that game between privacy and security. So little by little, we are seeing that gap is closing, and we do not have to share. We do not have to sacrifice privacy in favor of security. And I think it's going to be a very interesting next years where with the European regulations, that will come into place very nicely and will help us all on that side.
Sorry,
Mike.
I muted myself. Yeah. Sila, what's your take on privacy versus national security?
Yes, so I'm definitely coming not from a cybersecurity side and looking more at this from the individual point of view and from the individual privacy. And I found it quite interesting that Claudia, you mentioned that after being in discussion with lawyers, you have been starting to think a little bit more about privacy. Because also for me, it actually seems that privacy is so cross what's right word like it's not only a legal issue, but it's also about like design. It's also about what kind of technologies we actually build for this privacy. So I would look privacy actually from a wider perspective. But the main starting point where we come from, of course, at My Data Global is the main idea around human-centric approach to personal data and the right of people to control what happens with that data, who uses it, if it's needed to be able to correct it, to share it with others, also revoke the permissions, really have meaningful ways to work with data. And through this human-centric paradigm, we aim towards a more fair, sustainable, and prosperous digital society, which is a society where the sharing of personal data is then based on trust, as well as also balanced and fair relationships between individuals and organizations. This data sharing, of course, needs to be secure and protected, but that doesn't mean that this data couldn't be used. So we want to enable individuals to make use of their data in various ways and give permissions for different services to create value based on the same data. And that would open up the value chain for much more actors to provide good services. Now, there's of course a lot of challenges and risks with data sharing and data storing and data processing, like being targeted for cyber attacks, data breaches, etc. So there's also incentives to work with infrastructures that enable secure data flows while avoiding the need to actually take care of the storing yourself. So currently, there are many different models that already try to work towards it. For example, many public and private organizations are building APIs to foster data flows. And at the same time, this is mainly reliable on the organizations who set them up. And individuals also have a quite hard time to grasp it, how this system works. Others are interested in building big platforms for integrating different services through the platform, while again the data flows and integrations are dependent on the agenda of the organization and create also an unnecessary lock-in both for individuals as other service providers. So to reach the vision of human-centric approach to personal data management, we believe that the individual should be the integration point between the data flows, who decides with whom they want to share their data. And this model could also alleviate the concerns regarding data being misused behind the closed doors of the organizations, because only they have the right and the means to share data with others. So we at My Data Global are also looking at various infrastructures that as I mentioned already, also standards and governance models that would enable us to pragmatically work towards such a future where, while we also remain agnostic to which infrastructure, for example, this should be. We focus on the principles and the core values defined in the My Data Declaration that is available on our website, and for the attendees as well. I invite you to read through this later on. But the main point that I'd like to emphasize here is that in order to start working and moving towards the vision of individuals being empowered to use data in a functioning and secure data ecosystem, we need to work towards the sixth My Data principle, which is interoperability. There are multiple different ways how decentralized infrastructures can enable data flowing. It's important to find the connection points, how these could also interact with each other. In the MyData community, there are numerous organizations working towards together towards the goal for opening up the data ecosystem in a way that would provide value both to the individuals and organizations. And we have used the phrase of being on a journey towards interoperability to describe it. Yeah. So in that sense, we're really working more with, there are many different kinds of models, different kinds of infrastructures. How can we put this all to work together so that we have private data flows for the benefit of the individual?
Perfect. Wijnand, you had some thoughts in the chat with me on how this all could be solved. National cybersecurity agents still working with private data.
Definitely, and I think my opinion is, let's put it that way, that it sort of stems from, because we talk about this a lot, and I think there's a lot of talk in the news and in the media as well. If you look at the recent release of The Social Dilemma, I mean, there's now giant organizations out there that know more about me than maybe my government does. And that is weird. And that is a model, and that is something that has grown over the past couple of years. And we've all agreed with it because we all use the services that they provide. And we all are, in the end, the product of these organizations. And again, it's only now that we come to the realization that this maybe has gone 1 or 2 or 3 steps too far, and that this is maybe something that needs to be pulled back. Because, I mean, you've been much closer to this than I have been, Red, but I believe that today governments might feel that they've already lost the race in terms of being in control of this, and having their citizens being protected is, I think, a very difficult task for them. So I think that's where change needs to start happening. And one of the things that I think needs to be really realized is that the world of IT has been, and still is, a very complex world. And it's been so by design almost, because that leaves a lot of people out there that are not in the know and that not necessarily can follow all of it as a victim out there, which can be created into a product by giving some simple services that they can use. And for me, it all starts with simplicity, going back to the drawing board and trying to make the world of IT and the services that we all need, because we can't do without it anymore, simple and understandable. And once we are understanding them and they are simple enough for all of us to see what is happening, then we can disagree with maybe what is happening in the background, whether we like that or not, and whether we want to be a product or not. So for me, it starts with untangling the spaghetti of IT that we have created over the last couple of decades and going back to basics in terms of providing services that are meaningful, storing, data sending and pulling it, data sharing, all of those simple things.
The topic of today was a responsible digital age, finding the balance between national cybersecurity and individual data privacy. And you add big tech to that. So the Facebook, Googles that are now maybe more of a threat than the national cybersecurity, or more of a party, I would say, than the national cybersecurity entities. These cybersecurity entities say that more and more is out of reach for them. So the new technologies, I mean, the multiple channels that we use to communicate. I mean, I've been chatting with you guys and I find it even difficult to, oh, you send me a message on Telegram, you send me a message on LinkedIn, and I replied on WhatsApp, and where was I in the discussion, you know? So let's make it indeed a little broader than only national cybersecurity, national security and privacy. Also include the big tech. Rick, what's your take on this? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, basically, users all over the world using the big tech application. Everybody uses Google Maps for their own benefits, right? And it's free. And the cost of something which is free is that you share your data. But the thing is, I think that users are not aware on how this data is exactly used. And I think that awareness is critical, and not only from a regulation perspective, because the European Union has tried it or is trying it to prevent this data robbing by the big tech by introducing things like GDPR and having users control their own data. But in the end, it's a user movement. And users must be aware of what they are sharing and how that is used in the background by big tech. And as long as it is not individually driven, then I think that legislation will always be behind of the big tech, and they will always find a way around it. So my view is basically create awareness for the user, for the individual user itself, and educate instead of trying to prevent things by putting more regulation, because regulation is making it really hard for big organizations to safely secure data, and basically all the responsibility of all this private data is put in the hands of companies that are processing it. So yeah, that's what I'm looking at. Like, okay, we now need to try and find solutions for things that could be prevented with awareness as well.
It's a user movement, you just said. In the previous panel, I heard people say that Facebook and Google are now asking the US government to adopt GDPR because they have done a huge amount of work already to become more and more compliant. I don't think they are, but they have tried to do something. And I think that would give them an advantage over national players in the US. So they basically are now asking for more privacy and not make it different than the GDPR rules are. Because if you have different regulations in all parts of the world, you can create a serious complexity for people that offer the services. So basically now a question to all, more focused on national security. What can national security companies do in this day and age with the strong big tech companies, with the move to basically blockchain powered solutions where a lot of cryptography is being used? So monitoring the world becomes more and more complex for them. They already complain that a lot of that is out of their reach. How would they need to respond to this? What would be your tip to entities like that? Do you have one? Any of you? Difficult question, huh? No volunteers?
Couldn't find the button. I'm sorry, that's my mistake.
Okay, right.
I think the answer is because indeed they are having a hard time. It was exactly what you said. How do we communicate? And I think the two of us, in order to get some preparation done, use like 4 or 5 technologies that are all non-European technologies, let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
And that's inherently where the problem lies. And I think I'd love to, and I think we've all set with different angles and with different opinions, the answer. So it's all more about the individual. The individual needs to become back in charge, which again is not easy, and it's not just a technology solution. It's something that I think we all realize. We need to be aware. That's what Rick said. We definitely need to be aware of what's happening right now, and then hopefully disagree with that, and then work towards a model where we have, let's say, online representation that is us, and not necessarily a third party in the middle, where we can opt in for the government to sort of overlook and have an idea of what we are doing with that online presence and with that online representation that we have. to give them an idea of what we do. And again, that doesn't have to be in terms of everything that we do online, but certainly more than what is happening right now, where none of what we do online is sort of passing by and is able to be checked or seen or understood by national agencies.
A good comment. When we were doing the preparation, Claudio, you were mentioning whistleblowers. I think the history of national security has some interesting whistleblowers in the last couple of years. Could you share your ideas and some of the work that you did for the European Commission regarding whistleblowers?
Well, first of all, the job was done by a big team of people, which is our side of our company, which is DLT Code. It's done by a lobby called Aspertic, which is led by one of a panelist from last year's Barcelona Blockchain Week, Josep Jover, which is a wonderful lawyer from Barcelona, that organized us a little bit into trying to help whistleblowers from Spain in particular, mostly because there are a few issues here, like in any other European countries. Later on, when we visited Brussels in different occasions, we learned that in other European countries there were a lot more issues than in Spain with other things and so on. And we saw that whistleblowers in particular have no means of defending themselves, because you can start pursuing them legally because of a lot of reasons, like company secrets and so on. And you would just disarm them by just having them into more and more legal battles to try to stop them in itself. So what the European Union did was bring together this resolution, this new directive, which is called Protection for People Who Report Crimes Against the Union Law, which has a very interesting data point, because you have to get all the information. What this directive in particular says, that you have to keep all the information from the whistleblower and provide him with a tool where he can, when he has to report any wrongdoings in the company, and the company cannot pursue this person in particular. So as you imagine, that behind all this, you need traceability, you need data stamps, you need a lot of legal procedure behind, and just all put it behind one tool. So whoever you would talk about this and all the process, the first thing that everybody will tell you is it's blockchain. So just to get the idea, this allows us not only into a traditional manner of who paid who to get a contract, but on a more technology side, that you have investigators, curious people in cybersecurity, without giving out names, that roam around the internet and find problems with different companies or different systems, like people that found out that gas station have or most gas stations in the world have a flaw in their valves for their tanks, and when they went to report this to different government branches, they got into legal issues, because it was like, what are you doing there? Why are you touching? Because if you do not discover the issue doesn't exist. So you're like, that's corruption as well. In the end, that's corruption. It's a wrongdoing, because there are contracts in the middle. There are government branches or government companies that allow other subcontractors to not comply with the actual contracts and requirements. When we're talking about this kind of systems, when on not gas stations, but other type of system, like for example, medical systems, which are on the HL7 protocol, where they change information from an X-ray machine to the doctor's computer directly, where they do not comply with GDPR or any other regulation itself, where you have all the information just traveling around the network without any kind of encryption, any kind of protection. That type of legacy is very complicated to take care of with the traditional means that we are using until now. So when you cannot protect the information itself, you can protect the access at the information itself. Because when we talk about national security, we don't talk about spies or politicians, we talk about our water system, our medical systems. So traceability and authenticity, it's key. When you have this type of issues, you do need this type of this type of systems in place, where traditionally, if we talk about a logging system, you would have to put another log in place with different access rights, with a very complicated management system behind. So as nowadays, you just prepare a forensic readiness program, you put blockchain into place, whichever network you want, and you just write things there, and you have the traceability and authenticity of everything. And at the same time, you can analyze it and know clearly if you have any kind of intrusion or anybody had access to data that they weren't supposed to access. So I think in the end, all these issues that who accessed there what without any type of control, you can bring it down. When we're talking to a government on a government scale, you can bring it down to corruption. Okay. So I think
with blockchain, we don't need whistleblowers anymore. Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is that with blockchain, we can protect better whistleblowers. Mm-hmm. Because now it's not an issue that someone reported and went against company policy. Now we are talking that there are regulations that says to the company that starting 50 persons in itself is going to start by 2021 is going to be mandatory. There are companies in Europe have to have a system to report corruption inside their organization, and that implies that they need to have a forensic readiness program inside the company, that they will have to store logs, they will have to store a lot of crucial information in a very sensitive way. And a part of that, talking about national security, different regulation like the network and like NIST already tells you that you have to secure all this type of information. And aside of confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which is the three dimensions that we usually look at, you need the traceability and authenticity. So from a technical point of view, and I think Reed, you're going to be the perfect person to understand this, is from a technical point of view, if you have to do it with traditional tools, all this, you actually have to buy, again, all the computers that you have in your server room to look after the other computers. But if you put together a forensic readiness program based on blockchain, all that traceability and availability, you can put it in a single place, and you can make it very easy to audit. Whenever you have an issue and you have to, for legal compliance, someone has to come and audit you, it's going to be very easy. From a whistleblower point of view, is that if you start and say, I think there's a wrongdoing here, you don't have to give that much detail, you don't have to get into any legal issues, you just have to start the process. So in the end,
only point to the transaction on the blockchain, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
maybe for the whole group, how can blockchain? Clearly, blockchain can help whistleblowers, but how can blockchain help national security agents? I mean, for example, the imminent threat of the lone wolf. How would blockchain use that? Maybe Rick, you launched a blockchain, so maybe that's a question for you.
Yeah, I can respond to that. Well, basically, regulation is biting us in the ass here, because blockchain basically is a system to put data immutable on the chain. And what does GDPR says? If it comes to personal data, which you see a lot, definitely in government organizations, financial transactions, you see a lot of personal data going around. And if you store that on 100+ nodes, you basically don't comply with GDPR, because you need to ask all nodes to erase or moderate the data upon request of a user of which the personal data belongs to. So here's a contradiction, if you know what I mean. So I think the technology provides, the blockchain technology provides a great amount of transparency, and basically whistleblowers can point out to a transaction like, hey, there is a fraudulent transaction here in this organization. He points out the transaction ID of the blockchain transaction, and everybody can check it. But on the other hand, it is not compliant to do it that way for organizations. So they're really reluctant of doing that. So I think technology and the laws are basically are having a fight here. So we need to solve that first in order to make this happen on a bigger scale.
Wijnand, I see you nodding. Any feedback, comment from you?
No, very interesting altogether, definitely. And it is a huge issue. You can't just indeed store the same information of one individual 100 times over in one blockchain, in one organization, or in one government, and then you're stuck with that, right? So again, to my previous statement, I think we're all saying the same thing in the end. The person in itself needs to be in charge of the data that he owns and the data that he has and the data that he wants to share in the end. And then I think it's no longer an issue of actually storing the data, but it's a link to an ID or to a hash or to whatever you want to call it in technical terms that actually is traceable. But that is an anonymous traceability, which then solves the corruption issue. It allows the individual to host and own its own data, and therefore you circumvent, because that's it in this way, the laws and being in compliance with them. That's where we're steering for a very different reason. I mean, the reason with us is that we believe that the world does not receive equal services. So there's a lot of people, half the planet basically, that hasn't got access to the internet as we know it. That has some very good reasons, because the model that has been developed by these giants is just not applicable in Africa, because they don't have 10 megawatts of sustainable power that you can do that with. So it needs to change. Hence, again, not too much detail here, but hence we've turned that whole thing upside down and are now paying small quantities of processing and data storage facilities, for which we need an online identity, because you can't rely on those people to actually maintain and operate those systems. So it's a consequence with us of having the desire to go to places where none of the others have gone yet. But there is already a first look in terms of how this can actually solve also the data ownership and data storage capabilities, and have no longer these oligopolies controlling us and using us as a product. But that's half a promotion pitch, so I'll stop.
Yeah, I think you're doing interesting stuff there. So for everybody that is listening and find it interesting on what we all are doing, please look our names on LinkedIn and check our backgrounds, because this group of panelists are definitely doing some interesting stuff. Silly, any comments from your side on the whistleblowers or blockchain for national security agencies?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I've been listening the other panelists, and of course I'm not coming from a purely technical side, but rather seeing this holistically. And what comes to mind is that many of you have been mentioning about raising awareness and bringing the individual to the center again, and as an active an individual that would have an active role in this system. And for that, of course, there's always the question of what comes after the awareness have been raised, because then you need to also have these meaningful ways how to also put that awareness into action. And of course, from that awareness, you can already start building that once you have the know-how, but also a lot of people don't even either don't have the skills or not just interested in particularly in that field, for example. So in any case, there needs to be also practical means in order to actually empower those people who are we bringing into the center again. And what's sounded to me from Claudio's insights on the whistleblower and the legislation that is upcoming is that it also is a means that will protect those people and also can enable them in putting their awareness into action. So it's like without going into too much detail, I think that comes back to the very simple idea that you need awareness, but you need right away also this meaningful ways how to implement that. And this is one of the very core shifts that we want to also see in the society, that individuals are not only the ones that need to be protected from anybody else who can do really bad harms towards those individuals, but throughout the use of technology and support given to our citizens, we constantly empower them and constantly give them the resources so that they can do the things that they want to do with their data, because the data is about them. So like these are the thoughts that are coming to my mind when I'm listening this discussion.
Yeah, so it's my feeling. It's a pretty complex problem, right? We're empowering the users. We're giving them wallets. We're giving them encryption technology. We empowering them with technology that makes it from a centralized to a decentralized world. So it looks like we are building an architecture that is incredibly more difficult for national security entities to monitor. But the big tech still owns a big part of the centralized systems, and they can monitor basically everything. And the big tech is predominantly from the US, and the US has a strange president at the moment who's pulling back from Europe as well. He said, Europe, you're on your own, take care of yourself. And there's a power shift going on. So, I mean, if I was in charge of the national security of a country in Europe, or I would be in charge of the national security of a country in Africa, then this whole ecosystem bothers me. There's mechanisms to transfer money outside of the classic banking system. The classic banking system we saw with scandals recently doesn't have a lot of control, or at least are doing this, as we say it in Dutch, looking through the fingers a lot because they want to make money. So, any tips? How can we, as a specialists in our field, make the job of a guy responsible for a country's national security?
I definitely have some comments on that, because I know that the Dutch national agency is already doing on-chain analysis for Bitcoin, for instance. So basically monitoring every transaction which is done. And the great thing about the blockchain is that you can retrace every transaction until its first genesis. But the problem is that there are still people able to withdraw. Like creating a wallet is anonymous still. The only thing which is not anonymous is pulling out the money. And the only way to do that is via exchange. And here's where basically national security, but also the governments can do something about. And that is basically regulating those exchanges, because if you regulate the exchanges, then money cannot be pulled out and cannot be like spent in the real world. And I think that's a big step forward also for blockchain adoption in general, and of course also the perception of blockchain, because although it's getting better really fast, it still has this. This thing started on Silk Road, right? Basically to finance terrorism and drugs, and well, you still have the non-believers saying that. And as long as the exchanges are still able, or where you're still able to have anonymous transactions also on exchanges, then this sticks to the blockchain in general, I think. So hopefully regulation is coming soon, and the US is already making good progress on this.
What kind of regulations are they developing?
Basically providing banking licenses to the crypto exchanges that are compliant. Yeah, so basically Kraken just got a US banking license, Coinbase has one. Coinbase has also a financial institution license in Europe. So basically, the bigger ones are understanding that the way forward is to basically become under the normal regulation like banks are. And I think if this line continues, crypto won't be as anonymous as it was before.
Yeah, I agree with you. To get more adoption, we need people to start playing by the rules, of course. So yeah, I'm in favor for that. Any comment more on what I just said?
I'm not sure if it's directly relevant to what you said, but I think whether it's technology or not, or whether it's digital or analog, or whether it's whatever, I mean, there's always going to be people that want to fly under the radar, not to be seen and not to be found. That are the challenges that the national security agencies need to be dealing with. I think the people that just want to play according to the rules are open to accept new ways of actually engaging with governments and showing how they operate their daily lives and what they do in their daily lives to a degree, because there's always this level of what is privacy. That was the art of the discussion as well, and what is something that
So we should have like zero knowledge proof on am I a terrorist or not? Just prove it yourself.
No, but you know, so I don't think that we're going to solve that here, but I do think and I do believe that we've created an environment which is complex, and complexity leads to not understanding anymore, and not understanding anymore leads to, on both sides, on the side of the people that don't want to play according to the rules, they can hide and do whatever they want. And on the other side, they need to invest and continue to invest and get more knowledge and spend more capital and spend more systems, like I think you said earlier, in order to manage and maintain and monitor a data center, you need to build a data center next to it. I think that's a road which we need to stop, because that's not going to do it, right? And I don't think I've got an ultimate answer to how to do it in a different way, but there certainly is, when we do create awareness, back to that word, when we create awareness with people that there is an alternative to not being a product, not being overlooked and controlled by the government, there's a very good space in the middle that actually allows us to control the data that we generate and allows us to share out the data that we have and own to people that present either a benefit back to us, because that's one way of doing it, or is a mandatory thing to be compliant or in compliance with the law. And I don't think the majority of society and citizens has a problem with that.
Yeah, Wijnand, do you think that the burden is now completely shifted towards the companies that are in control of this data, and basically shifting a bit of that burden back to the users? I think that is good also for the awareness point of view. What do you think of that?
I totally agree. And again, I'm in a similar space than you are, explaining to people wallets and what have you. And if you tell them that there is no way back, even when you lose your private key, then people panic and freak out, right? But if you give them a bar of gold, they buy immediately a safe and they put the bar of gold in a safe. That they understand. And in reality, there's no difference between the two. those two are valuable things. So again, I think it's time and awareness that we need to process, and we need to try to get away from that crazy world that is being presented to us, or has been presented to us, about the crypto and all of the nastiness that's there, because it's not really. I mean, there are some, just like in any city, in any square, in any school.
It all starts with the adoption and the great adoption of digital identities. And I think key management needs to be done by governmental institution. Basically issuing now your passports, why not issuing your private keys, or reissue a private key when you lose it? So I fully agree with you there, Matt.
So you would lobby for a centralized key management system to make it easier for national security agencies, or is it more of a decentralized approach for you?
For me, the approach in the beginning is decentralized. So like you have your private key, and then you're able to manage your data yourself. But there should always be a fallback scenario, because people lose their passports. They also will lose their private keys, or the private keys will be compromised. And in that case, a central organization needs to reissue. Because otherwise, like the bar of gold, if it gets stolen, it will be lost forever, right? And the same applies for your data. And if you lose your private key, you basically lose your data. So there should be a central protection being built around that. And I think that's what a government should do. That's the function of a government, in my perspective.
Last stop. Yeah, sorry, Wijnand.
I want to make it a little smaller, because I always look back to learn from the past. And I think we need to go back to that time where we were trusting our neighbors and trusting our village, fellow village people that we lived in, where we would store valuables with people that we trusted, right? We would store value with family members. And I think the model of actually knowing who you deal with locally is important. And again, I'm not sure, but I'll take that discussion up with Rick after the panel, whether or not I see a central government body doing that, or more a local community type approach where you really know the people that you're dealing with. It could be maybe a city hall, which could be, I mean, in the end, a tennis club or a football club. It doesn't really matter, as long as it's a quorum of people that actually are close to me, that I trust, and that I am able to work with.
The last topic that I wanted to address here is software has bugs, and I just saw an intelligence report again with how much critical bugs there were released in the last week, and the numbers are staggering, right? There's bugs everywhere. So are we talking about a solution, or are we talking about a problem that really is existing? Or, I mean, it's clear that some of these bugs are known by secret agents, central government agencies. They know about these bugs. They don't share them if they discover them. They enjoy the fact that there's a backdoor somewhere, knowing that there's a huge amount of backdoors. Are we talking about a real existing problem, or are there enough backdoors for those agencies to enter anybody, basically?
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I'm going to say the same answer. Complexity, layering software on top of software, creating all sorts of APIs and wanting to pull it all together, it's unavoidable. Because if you make it so complex, then you just don't oversee, or there is not a single person anymore that oversees the whole thing. And again, I come from the data center world. The first customer deployed in a 1,000 square meter data center is simple. The second one is okay. The third one is okay. The 500th one, you don't know anymore what happened to the first one. And that's just a fact of how you deploy these things in this way. And I think that's why we need to find a different way of doing it. So try to avoid complexity, which has, and it's the last thing, because I spoke a lot, which I'm going to say, is that also affects the whole industry's business model and earnings model, which I think is the biggest problem there, because people rely on complexity because they sell professional
services. Yes. Claudio, last comments from you on this?
I think there's a lot of work to be done. And I think there's a lot of work already being done. All this new regulation coming to place, and as well as there's a new initiative in Europe that I'm following very closely, which is Gaia X, which tries to bring all the cloud professional service back to Europe and creating a very interesting ecosystem here, which is promoted. It's registered in Holland as an association right now, I think. It's promoted by the government, by German government and the European Union. Wonderful project, and I think it's going to solve a lot of the issues that we were talking about the last 20 minutes. Pretty interesting to take a look at their manifesto and all the documents that they provide until now, because they will possibly be the next place where we're going to deploy our networks, including the blockchain ones, for an enhanced security. And regarding the centralized identity issue, we should really take a very good look at it, because we might very well provide means of surveillance to a lot of not very interesting people, national and international. So a single point of failure, it's a very interesting thing. And a single point of failure with 0 days, it's an even more interesting one.
Sila, I want to give you 30 seconds because we need to wrap up.
Okay, I'll use it wisely. I really liked what Wijnand said about trust, and Rick as well. You need to trust somebody. We need to also rebuild trust towards this, the way of how we are using data and technology, and it's really hard to measure. How do you actually build this trust, and how do you know who to pick? And for that, I think no technology can solve it alone. It's just a very simple idea that you need to bring all these different perspectives together from business, legal, tech, societal perspectives, and so forth. But while it's a simple idea, it's not easy, but we should nevertheless work towards it. So I'm eager and excited for that.
Perfect. Well, all we discussed, we went from left to right, from north to south, I would say. We spoke about national security, we spoke about big tech, we spoke a lot about personal responsibilities. Rick said something, it's a user movement, and I said it's a legal movement as well with GDPR. With the whistleblower discussion, we added a blockchain to the equation, and the transparency that provides. We discussed vulnerabilities in software. We discussed centralization versus decentralization. So we touched a lot of topics, but the complexity is complex, and being in charge of national security of any entity in the world today is a complex endeavor, because the power of technology is being brought in the hands of the users, and they can more and more secure themselves. So that definitely creates a difficult challenge for them. We as individuals, we like the privacy that it's providing, so that's good for us. Thank you all for participating, and I think the technical team behind it will now start the movie. There are some questions in the Q&A that we may want to look at and see if we can answer them. Thank you all.